satisfied. I don't feel like I've ever embarrassed myself or my people, you know, in nothing that I've done. And yet and all, I got the whole world fearing me, you know what I'm saying? At 23, weighing 160 pounds, you know what I'm saying? And I ain't even started. I haven't even wrote my plan out yet, and they scared. I got the vice president know who I am, the president, every cop in every city.
September 7, 1996. The night Shakur was gunned down in Las Vegas wasn't just a tragedy. It was the culmination of a betrayal, years in the making, orchestrated by the one person he trusted most, Snoop Dogg. What unfolded under the desert neon was not an isolated ambush, but the final act in a quiet power struggle that had been brewing inside Death Row Records for months. Suge Knight, Diddy, and Snoop each had something to lose if Shakur kept rising. By that night, one of them had everything to gain from his silence.
So I consider my rap as a conversation more or less than a rap, because if you take the music off and just listen to my words, it's like I'm conversating with you rather than screaming and hollering over them.
To understand how it reached that point, we have to rewind to October 1995, when Shakur walked out of Clinton Correctional Facility a free man. His release wasn't a random act of mercy. It was a $14 million bailout orchestrated by Suge Knight, with Snoop Dogg's enthusiastic endorsement. Death Row's new recruit was about to change hip-hop forever. Within months, Shakur recorded All Eyes on Me, the first double studio album in rap history, and it exploded. The album went multi-platinum, and suddenly the label's crown jewel wasn't the Dog Father anymore. It was Makaveli.
Then as soon as I walked out of there, I went in the bathroom and I threw up. He just laid on the floor for like 30 minutes. His mama came in there and cleaned me up.
Behind the scenes, that shift burned bridges. Several former associates have said that Snoop, once the uncontested star of Death Row, began feeling sidelined. Outlaws member Napoleon later described it as jealousy disguised as friendship. By early 1996, the tension was visible. Shakur's aggressive work ethic, his charisma, and his street credibility pulled the spotlight away from everyone else, especially Snoop, who was dealing with his own legal troubles and a stalled follow-up to Doggy Style. Industry insiders whispered that the energy in the studio had changed, that Suge treated Shakur like family while Snoop felt like an employee. Snoop himself would later admit the friendship cracked right before the tragedy. In a 2023 interview, he said, "A week before he passed, we was best of friends. 2 days before he passed, I don't think he liked me." That small confession hit harder than any headline. It confirmed what Death Row insiders had been hinting for years. Their brotherhood had soured just as the bullets started flying.
That's why you get these type of individuals always kicking dirt on Pop name after they made their millions from doing these documentaries.
Because while Shakur was recording Hit 'Em Up, a track that set fire to his rivalry with Biggie and Diddy, Snoop was quietly playing both sides. On Hot 97, just days before the Las Vegas trip, Snoop publicly praised the same people Shakur was at war with. His words were simple but seismic. I want to do some music with them. For Shakur, that wasn't just betrayal, it was treason. Here was his supposed ally extending a hand to the enemy camp that had already drawn blood. Behind that comment lay months of strange behavior. Sources close to Death Row said Snoop had started distancing himself from Suge's growing paranoia, keeping a low profile while rumors spread that Diddy and the East Coast scene had offered him a lucrative partnership. Nothing was confirmed, but the timing was impossible to ignore. As the East Coast-West Coast feud reached its boiling point, Snoop's diplomacy looked less like maturity and more like insurance.
Hey, that boy life is dangerous. His life isn't, he's just not dangerous with they said he was doing, but he's in danger. He knows too much.
Then came that fateful weekend in Las Vegas. September 7, 1996. Shakur had flown in to support Mike Tyson's fight at the MGM Grand. Everyone expected Snoop to be there, but he wasn't. Reports later revealed that he told Daz Dillinger, another Death Row artist, "Don't go, something's gonna happen." That warning, according to Suge Knight himself, changed everything, because when the shots rang out on the Vegas Strip, Snoop was nowhere near the scene, but he was allegedly listening. On his new podcast, Collect Call, Suge claimed Snoop had a Nextel radio that night. He wasn't just missing, Suge said, he was listening. Those words set social media on fire. How would Snoop have had access to a communication line that, according to Suge, was only for those present at the fight? And why did he have real-time information as Shakur's car was sprayed with bullets? Knight's implication was clear. Snoop wasn't shocked by the ambush, he was expecting it. That accusation came decades after the case went cold, but it reawakened questions many fans had buried. Why did no one ever face charges, despite confessions, interviews, and memoirs that practically detailed the hit? Why was Shakur not wearing his usual bulletproof vest? Why did witnesses vanish, and why did his autopsy report contain inconsistencies? Each unanswered question added oxygen to an old fire, and Suge's claim threw gasoline on it. The official story said the drive-by was random retaliation tied to a casino brawl earlier that night with Crip member Orlando Anderson. But insiders now claim that confrontation was a convenient cover. What if the real setup started long before the fight, inside death row itself? According to Suge's new narrative, someone close to Shakur was already feeding information to their rivals. And if Snoop was secretly negotiating with Diddy's circle, the hit wasn't just gang-related. It was business.
On your own platform, he said this on your platform that he put up $1 million to get Pac here.
Yeah, correct. He was around Puffy and Puffy made a comment.
We've learned from multiple reports that Diddy allegedly offered a 7-figure sum for a problem to disappear back in 1996. Former gang member Keefe D, who was recently charged in connection with the shooting, has admitted that a deal existed, though he's refused to name who handed him the cash. Prosecutors won't confirm or deny any link to music executives, but in Suge's telling, that trail leads straight to Snoop. He points out that the Long Beach rapper later formed ties with those same executives, appearing at events and even collaborating with people once labeled enemies. It's a heavy accusation and one that no court has ever upheld, but the timing of Suge's allegations is suspiciously strategic. From his cell, he's watched Snoop not only reclaim his image but take ownership of Death Row Records, the same empire Suge built and lost. In 2022, Snoop bought the label from MNRK Music Group, calling it a full-circle moment. To Suge, it was more like a hostile takeover. He's openly questioned the legality of the deal, saying, "Show me the paperwork, show me what you own." The bitterness between them has reignited old theories that the betrayal in 1996 wasn't just about ego, it was about power.
Snoop's argument was with Snoop, not with us. It was internal. So he changed who he was, we didn't. And I didn't like when he tried to make it seem as if black people don't sit together. We did. 92% of black men voted against him. 86% of black men. We stuck together, you didn't.
During the 90s, Death Row was the most feared label in the industry. It ran on loyalty, intimidation, and a strict hierarchy. Suge sat at the top, Shakur became his golden weapon, and Snoop was supposed to be the bridge. But when that bridge cracked, alliances shifted fast. As Shakur's lyrics got darker, insiders say Snoop started playing peacemaker, at least on camera. Privately, he was making plans to distance himself from the chaos. His statements praising Biggie and Diddy, his absence in Vegas, and his quick move to other labels after Shakur's passing all point to someone who saw the storm coming and decided to stay dry. There's also the haunting irony that after years of rivalry, Snoop now controls the Death Row legacy, while Suge speaks from behind bars. For some, that looks like justice served. For others, it looks like unfinished business. And when Suge started calling Snoop out on Collect Call, accusing him of destroying hip-hop and Death Row's credibility, it sounded less like a business dispute and more like a confession wrapped in revenge. Suge has a long history of mixing truth and intimidation, but he was there that night. He was in the car when the bullets hit. He survived, grazed by fragments, and claims he saw things that never made it into police reports. What he's now saying publicly, that Snoop had foreknowledge, that Diddy bankrolled it, that the hit was arranged for $1 million, has given the old case new life. Law enforcement in LA and Las Vegas haven't commented on his claims, but online investigators and former bodyguards are connecting dots. Michael Nice, a former security officer tied to the Black Panthers, once told TMZ he helped smuggle Shakur out of the country after hearing there was a hit order. Nice later turned up deceased, just as he promised to release proof. In his interviews, he insisted there was a hit out on Shakur. We heard it. We got him out. If that's true, then the attack on the Vegas Strip may not have been the end, but a cover-up for an escape. And if that escape was facilitated, someone on the inside had to make sure the chaos looked real.
So him being neutral in the beginning was amazing. And then him choosing sides at the end was a demise.
That someone, Suge now suggests, was Snoop. He points to the missing hospital visit as the ultimate clue. Snoop has repeatedly said he fainted when he saw Shakur in the intensive care unit and was consoled by a Afeni Shakur, but Suge disputes it. He says Snoop never showed up at all. If Snoop truly believed Shakur was alive somewhere, like Suge has hinted over the years, that absence wasn't cowardice, it was compliance. Meanwhile, the arrest of Keefe D in 2024 reopened the file. He's now the only person ever charged in connection with the case, and his testimony could either confirm Suge's claims or destroy them. Prosecutors say Keefe was in the car when the shots were fired, but Suge insists he's a distraction, a fall guy meant to close the case without touching the real money trail. He argues that if Keefe was part of the hit, he didn't act alone, and that the orchestration went higher, to people with the resources to pay for silence.
Yeah. But Snoop lying is the progression of Snoop Dogg. He's the growth. into the maturity and has a third eye, and he's able to speak on issues that Snoop Dogg couldn't speak on.
We can't ignore how cleanly everything wrapped up for Snoop after that night. He distanced himself from Death Row, joined Masterpiece label, rebuilt his image, and decades later returned as its owner. Every move looked like redemption, but to Suge, it looked like inheritance. His podcast is his courtroom now, and he's laying out his evidence piece by piece. The missing radio, the skipped flight, the friendly words about Biggie, the unmade hospital visit. Each fragment paints Snoop not as the loyal friend history remembers, but as the quiet witness who watched the empire crumble and stepped over the ashes. And as Shakur's legacy continues to haunt hip-hop, that question refuses to fade. Was it ambition, fear, or loyalty that kept Snoop from warning him outright? The industry has never answered, the police have never proved it. But the story doesn't stop there, because when Shakur lay bleeding in that hospital bed and Snoop stayed silent, the world lost more than a voice. It gained a mystery that still burns under the surface of every verse, every headline, every whisper, that Death Row's golden age was built on betrayal. The real question isn't why Snoop didn't visit. It's what he gained by letting it happen.
He's 3 law firms on retainer. I don't know how much money is coming in, but I know that a lot of money is going out every single month for Diddy.
The $1 million hit on Shakur wasn't just about ending a rival. It was about securing Snoop's future. That's the claim buried inside Keefe T's 2019 confession, the same one that reignited the entire case. In his own words, Diddy put up the cash, but the green light came from inside Death Row. That single sentence turned a decades-old feud into an active investigation, pointing the finger not at outsiders, but at those within Shakur's own circle. Insiders close to the case say the money trail didn't stop with Keefe T's crew. It flowed through hidden accounts, shell companies, and contracts tied to the very label that once carried Shakur's name on its back. Within months of the shooting, Snoop Dogg quietly exited Death Row, signing with Masterpiece No Limit Records in what now looks like a preemptive escape. His move was packaged as creative freedom, but the timing tells another story. While Suge Knight sat behind bars and Death Row's empire collapsed, Snoop landed a multi-million-dollar deal that saved his image and kept him safe from whatever fallout might have followed. He distanced himself from the chaos, from the whispers of betrayal, and from the legacy of that night in Las Vegas. It was a clean break, too clean for a man who had built his fame on loyalty to the West Coast.
I'm quite sure I am Death Row. Suge Knight is Death Row. So I'm quite sure, before it's said and done, all eyes on me and Makaveli are the clocks up definitely to come back to me.
Then, decades later, history folded in on itself. In 2022, Snoop bought Death Row Records outright. The label that once defined gangster rap and housed Shakur's final days was suddenly under his control. He renamed it, rebranded it, and began digitizing its catalog. But as fans celebrated, Suge Knight watched from prison and exploded in frustration. On his podcast, he accused Snoop directly, saying, "You destroyed what we built. You took the money and ran. From Suge's cell, that wasn't just business, it was sacrilege." He claimed Snoop didn't buy Death Row to preserve it, but to bury what it once stood for. What Suge hinted at next was even darker. According to those who've heard his full, unedited recordings, he believes Snoop's purchase wasn't just nostalgia or revenge, it was cleanup. The deal allegedly included a quiet clause involving Shakur's unreleased tracks. We're talking about entire sessions that never saw daylight, tracks recorded between All Eyes on Me and the Don Killuminati. Suge says those songs contained references, lines that called out betrayal from within, verses that might have named the very people now running Death Row. Yet none of those tracks have surfaced. Shakur's estate, despite decades of lawsuits and licensing disputes, has never taken Snoop to court for ownership or control of those masters. And that silence has become the loudest part of the story.
And I try to, better myself every day and try to grow to be a better musician, a better person, and just be, more in control of the power.
A former Death Row producer told an industry podcast earlier this year that everybody knew Shakur kept naming names. He claimed the missing recordings could have upended reputations, especially Snoop's. Whether that's true or not, the coincidence is chilling. Those tapes vanished into corporate vaults, and with Snoop now holding the keys, they may never be heard again. Even the estate's lawyers have gone quiet. No public statements, no filings, nothing to suggest they're fighting for what should be their most valuable asset. It's as if a piece of music history was erased by design. Suge's narrative fits the pattern. First loyalty, then rivalry, then silence. In his version, the power shift after Shakur's passing wasn't natural, it was planned. He insists that by removing Shakur, the label's hierarchy cleared a path for Snoop to reinvent himself as hip-hop's global ambassador, far away from the violence and controversy that had built his early fame. That theory gains weight when we look at how Snoop rebranded himself in the years after. From family-friendly endorsements to movie cameos, he pivoted from menace to mentor, shedding the image that once tied him to Suge's empire.
We argued.
Over Trump?
When after this thing happened, he'll tell you, we talked for 2 hours shouting at each other.
Huh.
Snoop I loved him so much. I grew up in LA on 135th and Avalon. And when he got in trouble, I prayed for a crib. You know what it's like to pray for? I prayed.
But beneath that transformation, the contradictions linger. Snoop has publicly called Shakur his brother, recalling tearful moments and deep admiration. Yet those words echo differently now. As one former Death Row road manager said in a 2024 interview, brothers don't switch sides days before a setup. Whether Snoop was naive, strategic, or complicit, no one outside that small circle really knows. What's certain is that Shakur trusted him. He rode with him, recorded with him, and defended him against critics. And then, in the final days, that trust fractured, just as the money and power changed hands. The psychological blow of it is haunting. Snoop's calm demeanor, his smile, his humor, all of it sits in sharp contrast to the chaos he once navigated. If Suge's accusations carry any truth, that composure might not just be maturity, it might be the armor of someone who walked away from the fire unburned. Because in this version of the story, the real betrayal wasn't on the street, it was in the studio. It was on the radio, in those interviews that turned friends into enemies and shifted millions of dollars between labels. Keefe D's trial starts in June. Prosecutors say it could finally close one of the most infamous cases in music history. But if he decides to talk, really talk, it won't just expose who pulled the trigger, it could unravel the hidden deals, the secret phone calls, and the buried masters that have kept this story half-told for nearly 30 years. If he names names, the entire foundation of West Coast rap could tremble. Because when the truth comes out, we may learn that Shakur didn't just lose his life that night, he lost it to the one person who swore to protect him. So what happens if the courtroom mic finally captures the confession everyone's been waiting for? Does Snoop's empire survive? Or does the past rise from the ashes to claim its due? We'll soon find out. Stay alert, stay curious, and keep watching, because the streets never forget, and neither should we.